traversone, Altobelli.
He delivered goals like whispers, and Italy forgot to thank him. They remember the roar of Paolo Rossi in 1982, the theater of Roberto Baggio in 1994, the poetry of Del Piero in slow-motion replays. But the man who slipped a dagger between West Germany's ribs on a summer night in Madrid, the thin, needling figure they called Spillo, is too often an afterthought, a footnote in someone else's legend. This story refuses that. It goes hunting for the cracks, the quiet obsession, the sacrifice without spectacle, the way a poacher's life is measured not in posters on bedroom walls, but in the cold arithmetic of nets that ripple and seasons salvaged. It follows him into dressing rooms where celebration always sounded just a little louder for someone else, into a city that demanded beauty yet kept winning because a slender striker treated goals like a trade. It asks why a World Cup winner could become a whisper himself, and what was lost when we mistook silence for absence. We'll follow a 6-part path that looks for the hidden corners, the rumors and the bruises beneath the medals to tell Alessandro Altobelli's story the way it should be told: cinematic, unafraid, and human. Alessandro Altobelli was born in Sonnino, a modest town in the Lazio region, far from the industrial hum of Milan or the glamour of Rome. Football in 1970 Italy was in flux, scarred by scandals of match-fixing, reshaped by tactical revolutions, and animated by the rise of Catenaccio's iron walls. To break those walls, Italy searched for forwards who could slip through cracks, not just batter them down. And into this world stepped a tall, lean striker whose frame earned him the nickname Spillo, the Needle. Thin, sharp, and piercing. By the late 1972nd, Serie A had become a fortress league. Goals were rare, defenders brutal, the pace often slow and suffocating. It was an environment where flair was stifled, but opportunism thrived. Altobelli was not like Baggio, who painted pictures with his boots, nor like Rossi, whose 1982 Golden Summer turned him into a folk hero. Altobelli's art was quieter. He slipped behind defenders, struck at odd angles, and appeared in the right place at the wrong time for everyone else. Inter Milan made him their weapon. Over a decade at the club, he scored more than 200 goals, an astonishing figure given the defensive climate. He delivered a Coppa Italia in 1978, a Scudetto in 1980, and etched himself into Inter's bloodstream as one of their most reliable finishers. Fans admired his efficiency, but admiration is different from adoration. Italy worships the tragic genius, the artist broken by destiny. Altobelli was too consistent, too unspectacular to feed that hunger. The national team, however, could not ignore him. He became a fixture of Enzo Berzat's Italy, leading the line with understated menace. When Paolo Rossi stole the spotlight in Spain 1982, it was Altobelli who secured Italy's victory in the final, scoring the third goal against West Germany. His celebration was modest, almost subdued, as if he knew this was Rossi's coronation, not his. History remembers Rossi's smile on the podium. Few recall that it was Altobelli's strike that ended the contest. The 1982nd unfolded as Italy searched for a new identity. The economy stumbled, politics fractured, and football became the only theater where the nation could rehearse unity. Altobelli was there, leading Inter through seasons of change. But as the media embraced larger-than-life characters, the mercurial Baggio, the brooding Platini, the flamboyant Maradona, Altobelli's role shrank in the national imagination. He was a goal scorer without myth. And yet, under the surface, there were murmurs. Some said he never forgave the press for writing him off as ordinary. Others whispered about tensions with coaches who craved stars, not steady hands. The needle that pierced defenses could not pierce the walls of narrative. And perhaps that is the quiet tragedy that a striker who lived at the very center of Italy's greatest triumphs would spend his life standing just outside the frame. In the beginning, Alessandro Altobelli's story was one of relentless ascent. He emerged from the provincial pitches of Lazio, where muddy fields and worn-out balls sculpted a striker who needed neither glamour nor excess. Brescia gave him his first taste of professional football, and almost instantly, Inter Milan noticed the sharpness in his runs, the unteachable instinct to appear where defenders least expected. By 1977, the San Siro had claimed him. His rise was quiet but unmistakable. While Inter fans adored the elegance of Sandro Mazzola before him, or would later romanticize Baggio's artistry, Altobelli carved out his identity in simpler currency: goals. In a league where 1-0 was the most common scoreline, his consistency was nothing short of radical. He scored in Coppa Italia finals, in Scudetto runs, and in the most suffocating European ties. Opponents began to dread his wiry frame sliding into the penalty box, one touch enough to undo 90 minutes of labor. The zenith arrived in 1982. Spain's World Cup, where Italy began in crisis, drowning in criticism after a group stage of 3 uninspiring draws. The press spat venom, demanding Berzo's head. But Italy's patience birthed redemption. Rossi caught fire, and Altobelli, ever the quiet partner, ensured the machine kept running. When the final in Madrid reached its fever pitch, with Italy 2-0 ahead, Altobelli sealed history. He sprinted onto a through ball, calmly slotted past Schumacher, and ran toward immortality. It was Italy's 3rd goal, the one that broke West German resistance. And yet, when the tournament was over, it was Rossi's face on magazine covers. Rossi's name etched into collective memory. After the high came the subtle decline. Not of form, Altobelli continued to score season after season, but of recognition. He played at Inter until 1988, amassing 209 goals, second only to the untouchable Giuseppe Meazza. Still, his consistency became a curse. There were no dramatic collapses, no public meltdowns, no scandals to feed the tabloids. In a football culture addicted to operatic tragedy, his reliability was almost invisible, and yet cracks began to appear. Younger strikers, flashier and more marketable, began to emerge. Roberto Mancini was the poster boy of Sampdoria's rise. Gianluca Vialli embodied the new Italian charisma. Roberto Baggio, with his divine ponytail, was an artist destined to carry a nation's romantic hopes. Against these figures, Altobelli seemed old-fashioned, a striker of function, not spectacle. Rumors surfaced that Inter's board quietly looked for new icons to parade, leaving their record scorer to fade into the backdrop. His final years mirrored this bittersweet trajectory. He left Inter for Juventus in 1988, a controversial switch to a bitter rival, yet even there he was not truly embraced. One season, a handful of goals, and then another transfer to Brescia, a return not as a hero, but as an aging servant. For Italy, his last international appearance came in 1988, closing at 61 caps and 25 goals. More than respectable. Yet when the torch passed to Baggio, few turned to thank the man who kept the flame alive. The fall was not dramatic, not catastrophic. It was worse. It was a quiet erasure. A player who had been central to Inter's lifeblood and Italy's greatest footballing triumph slipped silently into the margins, where whispers replaced headlines. His goals had once silenced stadiums. Now, silence claimed him. The statistics say one thing: 209 goals for Inter, 25 for Italy, a World Cup medal around his neck. But the truth behind those numbers is heavier, lonelier, and tinged with bitterness. Alessandro Altobelli never hid his frustration at being treated as a supporting actor in stories he had written himself. The press lauded Rossi, worshipped Baggio, mythologized even those who failed on the biggest stages. For Spillo, there was only the cold acknowledgement of goals, never the embrace of legend. In interviews long after retirement, his words carried the sharpness of someone who had lived in shadows. He once confessed that he felt ignored by history, that Italian football only celebrates the tragic genius, never the steady craftsman. There were whispers of his resentment toward the Federation, how he was cast aside too quickly, how his name never appeared in the lists of Italy's untouchables. In a country where nostalgia is a religion, his legacy was filed away, almost deliberately, as though too ordinary to idolize. And then came the darker turns. Retirement did not gift him serenity. Like many ex-players of the 1982nd, he was forced to watch a world that had no place for his kind of hero. While others moved into coaching or the media spotlight, Altobelli's presence felt muted, occasional. He became a pundit, yes, but never a central voice. The bitterness often crept into his tone. He spoke of the forgotten heroes, of how football devours its servants and spits them back into anonymity. It was not scandal in the tabloid sense, no addictions, no financial ruin, but it was scandal in the cultural sense. That a man who gave Italy so much was left to wrestle with invisibility. There are stories never fully confirmed that in his final Inter years, he clashed with the club hierarchy, angry at the way new stars were promoted while his loyalty was sidelined. Some teammates remembered him brooding in the dressing room, head bowed, as though the weight of invisibility pressed harder than any defender's shoulder. A goal machine forced to live with the cruel paradox of football. You can be indispensable in the moment and disposable in memory. This was the silent torment of Spillo. He had the numbers, the medals, the moments, but in the mythology of Italian football, he was never given his myth, and that absence haunted him. It was not only about personal pride, it was about a truth no one wanted to face, that Italy had built its dreams on his goals and then quietly erased his name from the story. Looking at Alessandro Altobelli's career from the distance of decades, one question lingers. How can a man who scored more than 200 goals for Inter, who netted in a World Cup final, who wore the blue shirt of Italy more than 60 times, be treated almost like a footnote? Perhaps the real scandal here is not found in personal downfall or private disgrace, but in collective neglect. Altobelli was a victim of a system obsessed with narratives bigger than life. Italy adores the flawed genius. Rossi, the gambler who returned to save a nation. Baggio, the artist whose missed penalty became an opera of tragedy. Del Piero, the golden boy who carried the weight of Turin. Altobelli didn't fit that mold. He was efficient, disciplined, quiet. And in a culture that demands myth, efficiency is never enough. But efficiency built Inter's survival in the 1982nd. Efficiency carried Italy through the darkest group stage in World Cup history. Efficiency wrote a goal in the 1982 final that sealed a nation's triumph. The shame is not Altobelli's, it is ours, for needing spectacle before we can show gratitude. This channel believes Alessandro Altobelli deserves to be remembered not as a whisper, but as a pillar. He was not a wasted genius. He was proof that genius comes in many forms, even in the slender frame of a striker who didn't demand headlines, only nets that bulged. Yet he was also a victim of how football mythologizes its heroes. Drama eclipses dependability, tragedy overshadows triumph. So we ask you, the viewers, was Altobelli truly forgotten because he lacked charisma? Or because Italian football refused to value his kind of greatness? Was he overlooked or deliberately erased by a culture addicted to romantic collapse? What remains clear is this. Football history is not just about the names everyone chants. It is also about those who scored in silence, who carried teams without ever carrying the torch of fame. And perhaps, in remembering Alessandro Altobelli, we confront our own blindness to the men who gave everything and were given so little in return. Alessandro Altobelli walks today as a man of memories, not myths. The thin frame, the sharp runs, the goal in Madrid that closed the chapter of Italy's greatest summer, all of it remains etched in the minds of those who watched closely, even if history books have been less generous. Time has not erased him from the record, but it has blurred him in the collective imagination, as if his story belonged in the margins rather than the main stage. And yet, for Inter fans of a certain generation, Spillo is irreplaceable. His 209 goals remain second only to Giuseppe Meazza, the patron saint of the club. He is still whispered about in the corridors of San Siro, the striker who guaranteed that Inter's name stayed in lights during years of struggle. For Italy, his name is forever bound to that night in Madrid, when he sealed a victory that belonged to an entire nation. That goal was not glamorous, not theatrical, but it was final, the last nail that ensured the cup returned to Rome. Looking back, perhaps that is his true legacy, A reminder that not all legends wear the crown of drama. Some are quieter, forged not in spectacle, but in service. His story is a cautionary tale about how easily we overlook greatness that doesn't shout. It is also a nostalgic echo for those who remember football before the circus, when goals were worth more than marketing, and consistency was as heroic as flair. Altobelli may never be remembered like Rossi, Baggio, or Del Piero. But to forget him entirely would be to forget the essence of the game. That football is not only about beauty or tragedy, but about the needle that strikes precisely when needed. He's gone from the field, but never from memory. Some stories were never meant to be told, but now,